well, down the ramp came the car that I drew. I mean, to me, that is, you know, does that happen in Detroit now? I don't think so.
If I can interject for a moment, Bob Daler was the chief designer at Studebaker, not chief, but second in command kind of thing. And in '93, I did a 30th anniversary meet in South Bend, Indiana. I was fortunate to get a lot of the people that worked in the former owners of Avanti and whatever. Bob was scheduled to speak. Unfortunately, he passed away a month before the meet. And he was looking forward to it. He said he would take nothing away from the Lowy team. He said, but what people tended to forget was they were handed a scale model. And they had to translate that to a full-size car. And he said that was no mean feat. I mean, it really, I don't know the metrics of 1 inch equals powers of 10 kind of thing. And that's been my hook in terms of these underlying stories. But again, unfortunately, he passed away before he could have his little spiel. But I always found that interesting. And people don't also realize the interior generally was Studebaker. They did 99% of it, the design and everything else. Bob Naylor is the one that, those are Alfa Romeo seats.
Alfa Romeo, yes.
So if your seat breaks, you can find a really old Alfa, you might be able to swap it out.
Now, the story was he had a set of them up in his garage and he took them down or something.
Well, Egbert made daily trips to design, and the bump they used originally, he hit his head, which when the president of the company hits his head, that's when he came up with the Alfa seats. He said, you gotta be looking around.
I don't know if I remember right, but is Eugene Hardy? How big of a part did he play in that translation? He was the chief
engineer.
Yeah.
Not too much in terms of the design studio took what Lowy gave them and ran with it. Now they worked with Lowy's people side by side, but generally, I just found it amazing because I never thought about it. You said, you're handed basically a little scale model. That's got to be translated into a car.
Good point.
For those of you who don't know John, he is the author of many books about Avanti, but these two, if you're interested in the car, you really need to get these. This is a pictorial about Operation Airlift. It has pictures that I've never seen before. It's available. There's an ad for it in Avanti magazine.
There's only 3 copies. I only printed 50. There's 3 copies left.
3?
Really?
Well, if you want one.
I want one.
And then Andrew Beckman of the Studebaker Museum did a book about the Avanti, but to my way of thinking, the book that John did is much better. Goes into a lot more detail. If you haven't bought this book, I think, and he didn't ask me to do this, and I was going to do this before I knew he was going to be here. Great book, and we're really grateful to have John here today. If someone, I've been involved with Avantis.
Look, you did more than that one book, right?
Oh yeah.
How many books do you have, and what are they on?
2. The other second companion book is Studebaker, Avanti and Beyond. It's a lot of factory photos from MFG and Studebaker you've never been seen before. I'm currently, it's funny, Lou asked me about Dave Kinney's car over there, 5653, I believe. It's one of the engineering cars. And Gary and I have been talking. This is the first time I've seen Gary in 20 years. He looks a lot better than I thought he would.
Where is it?
He told me I better deliver this baby pretty soon because it's full term. We're one of the few, and I think there are a few of us around. Now that we know all the questions to ask, there's nobody around to ask them. That's the biggest drawback. So I've been scraping together information. I'm working on the 10 engineering cars because that's what really got started.
There it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've got the book. I had to read the book.
And you forget that, you know, in the glorified atmosphere, we're all in love with the car, whatever, that basically people had to design it, people had to build it, and I think this authenticity thing with Gary is, because we had talked, as a guide, it's a wonderful idea. It's an excellent idea, but the problem is every Avanti, every Studebaker Avanti effectively was hand-built. There's a gentleman, Carl Thompson, I did an article in the magazine years ago, I'll try to keep this short and sweet. He told me the system they had, as the Avantis were coming down the line, there would be constant changes. So he would give each workstation a roll of, what's it tape? Masking tape. And you'd ask them to write the car number down and the change and put it on a girder by their workstation. At the end of the shift, he would go through and take each of them down. That's why you have 2 parts manuals for the Avanti, the red, white, and blue cover and the gold one. And his appeal to me and why I did the story was, he said, John, they changed daily. They changed car to car. So there is no, it's not like you're stamping out 5,000 cars an hour kind of thing. They basically all were hand built.
Right.
But Gary has the wherewithal, and it's funny because I'm in a conversation with him and he'll slip into Gary mode and say, well, that's a 1/18 hex nut super stainless with a bolt washer. Okay.
Lou, do you mind if we ask questions?
We're going to get to that in a minute.
Sorry.
The turquoise car out in front is mine, the one with the flashing red light on it. And that's 5432 serial number. So that was one of the last few hundred cars that were made. And they had those yellow sheets that to talk to your point, after the car was made, they would send it to a dollop area or whatever you want to call it. And whatever adjustments needed to be made would be made at the station by various people. Now my car is one of the last that were made, maybe the last 200, 250. There are 5 pages of notes of things that had to be adjusted on my car. So when I first talked to Gary about the car, I said, well, you know, to your point, they're not all the same. Sometimes it depended on who was working on the line that day. You know, if they were in a good mood or if they were in a bad mood, you know, it might be, you know, a millimeter this way or a millimeter that way.
Avanti was also a priority for Studebakers. So remember, it was union. The seniority, people would bump to the Avanti line because that was the steady work.
Right.
So you got new people coming in constantly that hadn't done 100 cars or 200 cars.
So John, talk a little bit about this car, because
It's
it is
red.
very interesting. It's red, we know that.
Page up. Well, Gary and I, as I say, have been talking quite a bit about the engineering cars lately. They're effectively Studebakers prototypes. And this, 5 were taken, correct me if I'm wrong with the numbers, Gary, but I believe 5 went back to Paxton from South Bend.
Not that many.
Not that many?
No, there was,
The other one.
of the prototypes, I think only one went back. The
Okay,
rest
so
of
they
them-
weren't involved in the reserial numbering. That was just Studebaker doing it internally in-house.
Right.
Okay.
No, they only sold, ended up selling 4. And one of them was destroyed by fire.
Yep.
And they rolled one of them over, you know. One of them was in a wreck. It was wrecked.